Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to Outlaws, Gunslingers. Joe's Bang and Dang. We're moving on with our MC series. Milking this Outlaws MC for another couple episodes. We're going to take a look at Jim Nolan, who is the founder of the South Florida chapter of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club from like 1960 something to present. He's still going. And this guy's got in all sorts of trouble, killing people, got in prison, and RICO charges. Yeah, this guy's been all over the place. We're talking about Jim Nolan.
Big Jim.
Oh, Big Jim, James Thomas Nolan. They call him Big Jim. Born in 1943. Born in New Jersey in 1943 and moved sometime in 1955 to Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Oh.
He attended South Broward High School in Hollywood, Florida. Completed 2 years of college. Apparently dropped out because in the early 60s he founded the Iron Cross Motorcycle Gang in West Palm Beach and was president of the gang when the old Outlaws dispatched a representative named Donald D. Tanner to Florida. He said, don't you go down there spring of 1967 with the assignment, don't you go down there and found a chapter in the state. We need to expand to Florida.
Nolan, he began an association with Tanner. Assisted him in merging various Florida biker gangs, including the Iron Cross, the Cossacks, the Half-Breeds, and the Outcasts. And they all did this to form the Outlaws of South Florida, with the patch over ceremony taking place at Kitty Saloon, which is a roadside bar on State Road A1A in Juno Beach. And that happened in July of 1967. South Florida chapter initially used Kitty Saloon as a clubhouse, and its members resided in a dozen cabins behind the saloon. Oh, that's nice. Which they rented from the saloon's owner, Bertha Randall. They call her Kitty, obviously.
All right. Look at that. Don't even have to drive or drink and drive. Just stumble to the back.
Oh, they probably did anyway.
All right. Nolan, he's described by the Sun Sentinel as an intelligent and charismatic leader who sported long, wavy brown hair well below his shoulders and a full beard.
Oh.
He originally served as vice president of the South Florida Outlaws, with Tanner leading the chapter. Obviously, I mean, he came down there. He said, I'm running shit.
Right.
The Outlaws were quickly implicated in prostitution, narcotics, car theft, stolen credit cards, grand larceny, assaults, and other crimes.
Stolen credit cards in the 60s?
Yeah, man, this shit, probably the easiest time to do it. But it was an incident on November 14th, 1967, in which 5 outlaws they crucified an 18-year-old woman, Christine Deese, by nailing her to a tree in Jupiter, Florida, after she failed to turn over $10 demanded by the bikers.
Oh, get the hell out of here.
It gained the chapter the most of its notoriety and resulted in Florida Governor Claude Kirk Jr. vowing to drive the club out of the state. Well, yeah, when they're crucifying somebody.
For $10. Holy
Jeez.
shit. An interview with George Knobb of the Sunday News, December 1967. Nolan dismissed allegations against outlaws as hogwash. He said, so we have long hair and beards. Well, so did Jesus Christ. He's been around a lot longer than Governor Kirk. He's a lot of mouth, quote unquote.
Well, sounds like you're a lot of mouth.
Well, South Florida Outlaws chapter relocated to Fort Lauderdale after a campaign of the Popo harassment forced them out of Palm Beach County. Chapter was headquartered from a clubhouse located in an unincorporated neighborhood southwest of Fort Lauderdale, and had approximately 200 members and associates at its peak. Damn, that's pretty good for a little area there.
Well, when they moved to Fort Lauderdale, Nolan, he became president and regional president of the Outlaws in Florida for over 10 years. Biker historians have credited Nolan with convincing the Outlaws leadership in the Midwest of the importance of taking control of southern United States and the state of Florida specifically. Crime reporter Scott Bernstein, he described him as the Outlaws' overall patriarch in the Sunshine State and the South Florida chapter's revered godfather.
Oh,
you, Jim Nolan.
Right. Oh, Big Jim was instrumental in the Outlaws' rapid expansion throughout the state during the 70s. As the club amalgamated various smaller motorcycle gangs such as the Regents in Jacksonville, the Iron Cross in Orlando.
For you.
Due to the aggressive membership drive in the early 70s, Florida eventually had the largest concentration of outlaws in the whole United States of America. During Big Jim's presidency, outlaw members were forbidden from retiring the club under threat of violence. Oh, really?
You. Only way you're out of here is die.
Right.
South Florida outlaws initially derived the majority of their income from sex trafficking. Probably easy. South Florida.
Very simple.
Prostituting women known as old ladies who were deemed to be property of outlaw members. Mm-hmm. The women were supplied to topless bars along Florida's Gold Coast to work as dancers and prostitutes.
Fantastic.
The bikers maintained control over these women using various methods, including gathering information on and threatening the lives of their families.
Oh, shit.
And would occasionally buy and sell their old ladies amongst themselves. Oh. Hey, man, what's Sherry doing tonight? I'll give you $10.
Right.
Fuck it, man.
Wow. Under Big Jim's leadership, the Outlaws shifted their focus in the 70s from sex rackets due to decline in prostitution income. They're like, let's try illegal gambling and let's get some drug trafficking. And this was at a time when the demand for party drugs was at an all-time high.
All those weirdos dancing to the disco.
Yeah. Describing the bikers' motivations behind switching primarily from pimping to drug dealing, Assistant United States Attorney Gregory Kehoe, he said, there are problems with old ladies and drugs don't talk back.
It's true. Old ladies, you have to beat up and risk them going somewhere, telling somebody.
Yeah.
Drugs just kill.
Yeah.
The Florida faction of the Outlaws gained power and influence within the club by forging links with the Colombian and Cuban drug suppliers, sourcing cocaine being imported into the state from Colombia, which they then distributed to chapters in the Midwest and on the East Coast. In addition to coke, the Outlaws also sold wholesale quantities of, you guessed it, meth and heroin in Broward County.
A feud,
Yeah.
A feud between the Outlaws and the Angels began. Two members of the Aliens biker gang in New York City.
New York City?
Sandy Alexander and Peter Grease Lightning Rogers. They went separate ways, with Alexander joining the New York Angels and Rogers leaving to become a member of the Chicago Outlaws.
Oh, damn.
When Rogers returned to New York to attend a New Year's Eve party in Manhattan, 1973, severely beaten by Alexander after allegedly raping the Angel's wife.
Oh.
To save face, Rogers told his fellow outlaws they had been attacked by a dozen Hell's Angels.
What a pussy.
There was only one.
Well, in the spring of 1974, Nolan learned that 3 members of the Hell's Angels, Lowell, Massachusetts chapter, were traveling to South Florida. 2 of the bikers, Whiskey George Hartman and Edwin Riverboat Riley, they were visiting the state to supervise the covering up of gang tattoos belonging to Albert Oski Simmons.
Oh.
And he had relocated to Orlando to operate a motorcycle shop after leaving the Angels a year or 2 earlier. They said, this dude's been down there probably getting notoriety for his motorcycle shop because he was a former Angel. Like, cover him up or we'll cut him off.
Right.
Well, police believe Hartman and Riley they were also in Florida to source narcotics. Nolan called a club meeting to discuss what course of action the outlaws should take regarding the presence of the maggots who had beaten their brother, Peter Rogers.
All right.
Said, what are they doing in our territory? What are we going to got to send a message back?
Damn right they do. After receiving info that Hartman, Riley, Simmons will be at the Pastime Bar, which is in Fort Lauderdale, on the 30th of April, 1974. Big Jim and other members of South Florida Outlaws went to the bar. They began discussing their differences with the Angels before suggesting that they take the discussion off the street. Oh. The Outlaws then lured the 3 bikers to the clubhouse under the guise of a drug deal, promising no harm would come to the Angels. You idiots.
You guys retarded?
Should know better than that.
Well, when the Angels arrived at the clubhouse, however, Nolan, he ordered several fellow club members to take the rival bikers to a deserted area and, quote-unquote, make sure they don't come back.
Ooh.
4 outlaws, Henry Funky Tim Amos, doesn't make sense, William Gatemouth Willie Edson, Norman Spider Risinger, and Ralph Lucifer Yanoda. Oh.
No.
They then forced the Angels into the back of a van at gunpoint, bound them with pink clothesline, and drove them to a quarry in the Everglades, of southwest Broward County near Andytown, where Risinger killed each of them execution style with a 12-gauge shotgun.
Oh.
Dude, there was nothing left.
Oh, damn. The bodies of the trio were weighed down with 8 concrete cinder blocks, submerged in a flooded 20-foot deep rock pit. The murders were discovered on the 1st of May, 1974, after one of the corpses dislodged and floated to the surface, where it was seen by Stanley McElroy.
Or McElroy.
He was a passing motorist. Wow.
Damn, could have got away with it, too, if somebody learned how to tie a decent knot.
Wow. The other 2 were found by the popo. Hartman, Riley, and Simmons were identified by their fingerprints and tattoos, and not their face.
Right. Edson, he was then arrested in Canada for an unrelated crime in 1976, subsequently turned state's evidence when he was extradited back to the United States. He then named himself, Amos, Risinger, and Yanoda as those who committed the murders. Wow, on the orders of Nolan.
Oh, wow.
Damn, so he told on the big guy, too.
Damn.
1977, the Angels attempted to resolve the feud between the clubs by sending Sandy Alexander, along with Oakland, California chapter members Sergey Walton and Gary Popkin. Said, why don't you go meet with Nolan and the other outlaw leaders in Durham, North Carolina? Meet halfway. Sandy Alexander is the one that beat the shit out of the dude.
Is. Wow. Well, Big Jim and his people did not even show up at the sit-down. Along with Amos, Edson, Risinger, and Yanoda, Nolan was indicted by a grand jury in connection with the killings of April of 1978. They were charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. At that very time of this indictment, Nolan was being held in a county jail while he appealed a 5-year prison sentence he had received earlier that year on state drug charges. And he threatened the life of a Hollywood, Florida policeman by threatening to sick his dog on him, which was a 150-pound Great Dane.
Damn.
You see this big boy right here? He will get you.
Marmaduke will get that ass. Why are they charging him with murder when the dude just said that? Oh, you ordered it. That's not how it goes. When did RICO start? 1970. So, yep, that's how it works. But they didn't charge him with RICO, though.
No.
Well, state prosecutor Thomas Kern, he's characterized Nolan as the undisputed leader of the outlaws in South Florida, clearly, and asserted that he was responsible for ordering the 3 murders. Edson and Yanada, along with 2 other outlaws, John Igor Luce and Dale Brackett Webb, they testified against Nolan in exchange for lesser sentences.
Oh.
At the time of their testimony, Edson was serving a 20-year prison sentence for torturing a woman.
Oh, wow.
Luce was serving a 20-year sentence for beating a woman with a table leg.
Oh.
Webb, who was a former president of the Orlando chapter, he was serving life for kidnapping. Life for kidnapping? What else did he do? And Yanada was serving 4 concurrent life sentences for murder.
Jeez. All right. Damn. Big Jim's defense attorney, Ray Sandstrom, maintained that the state's case against his client was not such a neat package of sudden cooperation by public-spirited citizens as the prosecution would have you believe.
Well, clearly not. We just read the sentences of those guys.
Right. He noted that each of the 4 state witnesses who had implicated Big Jim had been benefited by agreeing to testify. Nolan's first trial for the murders ended in a hung jury on the 22nd December 1978, when the 12-person jury was split 10-2 for a conviction. A retrial, March 1979.
That's fucked up, dude. Yeah, if you get a hung jury, you shouldn't be allowed to retrial.
Right.
It's over with, dude.
Retrial in March of 1979 also ended in a mistrial. Nolan ultimately acquitted in a third trial later in 1979 after presenting what the state's witnesses testified was a fabricated defense. Okay. Well, you got away with that.
Well, clearly, the jury believed the old fabricated defense, huh? Well, in August 1974, though. What are we doing here? Okay, well, that was his ordeal with that murder thing. But he's not done, because even prior to that, August 1974, a woman named Joyce Carleen, she was invited on the offer of finding a job from Daytona Beach to stay in a trailer home in Hollywood, Florida, which she later discovered was the Outlaws clubhouse. On the first day of her stay at the trailer, Nolan hit Carleen after she refused to bring him a beer. On the second day, he raped her at gunpoint, informed her that as an Outlaws old lady, she would be expected to work and give her earnings to the club. And then he allowed 8 other outlaws to gang rape her.
Damn.
Jeez.
Oh, shit. Well, that very next day, Carleen was put to work as a topless dancer at a local tavern, along with other outlaw old ladies. Later that week, 22nd August, 1974, she was abducted as she left the lounge after work by several outlaws.
Dude, none of these other Mongols or the Hells Angels did their women this dirty.
Crazy.
That's crazy.
These outlaws believe that Carleen had stolen clothing bearing a property patch.
Oh, no, can't do that.
Which is an indicator of a woman's status as an old lady of the club. They said that she took it from one of their patched women. Oh. The outlaws tied Carleen to a chair at the clubhouse, stripped her of her blouse, before each took turns punching and kicking her, and then using a hot spoon to sear her repeatedly on her arms and breast. Oh, man.
Jeez. Maybe. Well, after they've had finished torturing Carleen, the bikers escorted other outlaws, old ladies, into the room while she remained tied to a chair, and they warned the other women that they would receive the same treatment if they misbehaved. You see this bitch here? You guys will get it too. Carleen was then dumped in a remote field. Several outlaws were later convicted of the beating after she reported the incident to the police. Clearly.
Wow. Shortly after that incident, Naomi Sinacub, the old lady of Outlaws member Donald Sears, they call him Gangrene, and one of the women who was with Carlene that night, she was beaten and tortured. They ran away. They said, we got to get the hell out of here.
Naomi said, bye.
Concerned that Naomi may implicate the outlaws in Carlene's beating, Big Jim, he contacted some of his fellow outlaws and told them, locate this bitch. Want her now. After Sears tracked her down, Nolan first had Naomi hidden in Miami before ordering Sears to kill that bitch.
That's your old lady. You deal with her. Mm. Well, Sears and another outlaw, Richard Dirty Dick Brainerd. They took Naomi out to Brainerd's fishing boat and shot her twice in the head.
Damn.
Naomi's body was then allegedly disposed of in one of two ways. The bikers either slashed her throat and abdomen, weighted her with a heavy object, dumped her into the ocean, or they trailed her body behind the boat until it disintegrated.
Wow.
Ugh. The body, nevertheless, never found. State charges were never filed against anybody.
Damn.
That's crazy.
Damn. During part of the late
What would be the...
insane.
Would they risk, like, just dragging her behind the boat?
Why not?
I mean, I don't, who knows? Wow. The 70s, anything can happen.
Right. During part of the late 70s, Nolan's old lady was Tina Wittenstein, who worked as a prostitute, sometimes as a topless dancer. July 1977, Wittenstein attempted to leave with the assistance of Vaughn Foreman, one of her regular clients. After staying out of South Florida for a month, Wittenstein and Foreman returned to the area. Why?
Dumb.
Nolan then seized Wittenstein and held her at his home under armed guard before sending outlaw members to locate Foreman and bring him in to the home of another club member.
Jeez. Well, at that home, Foreman was beaten with the butt of a shotgun and had a lit cigarette stubbed out in his eye. Then had the barrel of a shotgun put in his mouth and told to beg for his life.
Yeah.
When old Big Jim arrived at that residence, he told Foreman he wanted Wittenstein, his property, returned to him. He doesn't know that he has it. When Foreman professed his love for her, Nolan offered to sell her to him for $100,000, said he would not release her until he received the money.
Oh. Foreman was then forced to live with the outlaws for a number of days while he attempted to raise the funds. He and Wittenstein were released after Foreman had paid Nolan $40,000. Foreman gave another $20,000 to Nolan before he married Wittenstein in the fall of 1977. He and Wittenstein then fled to California to escape Nolan.
$60,000? This chick better stay with this dude forever.
Kidding, some bitch.
Damn. Well, this is not the only instance of him trying to sell a woman, because eventually he goes to jail, and he's incarcerated at the Florida State Prison on narcotics charges in 1980. Nolan was introduced to a woman named Iris Gagan. Gagan?
Sure.
Iris Gagan by another outlaw, Ronald Arab Watchmaker, who intended to gift Gagan to Nolan upon his release from prison.
Oh.
Well, Watchmaker instead gave Nolan 49% of the woman while he was still imprisoned. Nolan then offered to buy the remaining 51% of Gagan from Watchmaker for $2,000, and Watchmaker gave her the choice of whose old lady she would rather be.
Oh, wow.
Jeez.
Wow. Thinking that she would be entitled to better privileges as Nolan's number one old lady than she would be as Watchmaker's number two old lady, Gagan chose Nolan. She lived at Nolan's home in Fort Lauderdale, where she was watched over by Outlaws biker Michael Moldy Mike Cave, who also resided at the house while Nolan was in prison. Gagan visited Nolan in prison every weekend and often smuggled cocaine and marijuana for personal use and for sale. Look at that.
Might as well. During his incarceration, Nolan was quoted as saying, "I'd rather be an outlaw in the penitentiary than some jerk on the street."
Oh.
He eventually got paroled. September 1980, he began dividing his time between Fort Lauderdale and Tucson, Arizona.
Wow.
Which is the city he planned to bring under Outlaw's sphere of influence. He convinced the parole board that he was working for country musician and Outlaws member David Allan Coe. Oh. Although he was actually making a living in Arizona from the prostitution of his old ladies and drug dealing.
Makes sense.
David Allan Coe, Outlaws member, huh?
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
something you never knew.
Makes sense. He was joined in Tucson
There's
by...
no way.
Yeah.
Outlaw years from 76 to 82. No way. That was before his commercial success, too. Great googly moogly. Oh, yeah. See, outlaw country years. He's never with the bikers.
He says, I was in the Outlaw Motorcycle Club. I had my outlaw colors on. Had my pistol in my pocket. Rode my motorcycle up and down the stage while Waylon was singing. Got off my bike, went out, started singing with Waylon. And then Willie came out, sang with us. Outlaws of Florida.
Oh, that's the outlaw country movement started because supposedly of that.
Wow.
All right, look at you, David Allen Coe.
He was joined in Tucson by other outlaw members who began supplying prostitutes to topless bars in the city as well. Nolan took Gigon to Arizona with him, leading her to believe that she would be treated to a 30-day honeymoon, during which she would not be required to work as a prostitute. There was no honeymoon, and she did, in fact, require to work as a prostitute. Hey, what are you going to do?
Gotta make the money.
Yep.
Nolan, he also frequently began to beat Gigon after they had moved to Tucson, inflicting a broken rib on her on one occasion. January 1981, she visited her sick mother in Florida, although Nolan could not accompany her because of the terms of her parole. Oh. He let her go. He threatened to kill her stepfather, who was her mother's sole caretaker, if she did not return. Oh. When she asked Nolan if she could buy her freedom, he told her it would cost $125,000, but that she could not pay with her prostitution earnings, that money belonged to him. So you're already paying me with that. How you come up with another $125,000? You're gone.
Son of a bitch.
Jeez, dude, what is up with this guy?
March 1991. March. March of 1981. Nolan hit Gigon several times and called one of his older old ladies to take her home when she stumbled into a parked motorcycle at a biker bar. Oh, after a night of partying. You can't do that. While being driven home, Gigon escaped from the car at a stoplight, hid behind a convenience store. She was seen by the popo, who approached her and asked, "What the hell are you doing?" Although she begged them to leave her alone.
Uh-oh.
Just leave me alone!
While she was being questioned by the police, Nolan's other old lady alerted him to the situation, and he was able to take her home after he rode to the scene on his motorcycle, and he convinced the police that she had just too much to drink. Gigon jumped off the back of Nolan's motorcycle at another stoplight and tried to escape again, but he caught her and punched her repeatedly in the face until she said, "All right,
Oh, wow.
I'll get back on the motorcycle." The cops? What are the cops doing?
Right. Wow, when they returned to their home, Nolan broke Gigon's jaw, threatened to kill that bitch, pistol whipped her too until she was unconscious. Nolan allowed Gigon to visit a hospital after she concocted a false story to explain her injuries. Gigon spent 6 days in the hospital, where she had a pin surgically implanted in her jaw and her mouth wired shut. During a visit to her in hospital, Nolan brought another old lady. As he stood over the battered Gigon, Nolan said to the other old lady, "You see what I did to her? I'm in love with her. I don't even like you, motherfucker. Go ahead and piss me off."
This fucking guy, dude. Ooh-wee. Oh, my. After arriving home from the hospital, Iris, she woke up one night to find Nolan orally sodomizing his new old lady.
Whoa.
Just look at her butthole, huh? She was, but it was a 13-year-old girl. That's not cool at all, guy. What are you doing?
Oh, no.
Dismayed at what she had witnessed, she attempted suicide by overdosing on pills.
Damn.
When Nolan discovered her unconscious, he dragged her from room to room and beat her with a belt for over 3 hours.
Holy shit.
She managed to escape from Nolan the following day with the help of a friend and returned to her parents' home in Florida. Gigon's parents then phoned the cops. She eventually agreed to give police a statement against Big Jim. It's gone far enough.
Holy fuck.
Holy moly, man.
After she returned to Florida in April of 1981, Nolan arranged to purchase another woman from his longtime outlaw friend, Sad Sam Nail.
Yeah, he's a sad.
He goes, "I need another bitch here. I'm losing money. I need to get another one out on the street." He also began conspiring with Nail to traffic cocaine from South Florida to Arizona, which they succeeded in doing on at least 2 occasions.
Oh, good for you guys.
Right. With another outlaw, James Blue Starrett, to transport a large quantity of marijuana to Arizona from Florida as well.
Well, drugs, but now this finally guy is going to do some more. On July 11th, 1981,
Oh, man.
Big Jim shot and killed a man, John McQuillan. That was in the parking lot of the Bashful Bandit, which was a Tucson biker bar. Supposedly, because the men were arguing because Nolan had been repeatedly playing the same song on the jukebox. Hey, man, we all been there. He discharged 13 rounds from a 9mm handgun and hit McQuillan 8 times.
Damn.
After McQuillan brandished a .38 caliber handgun at him.
Oh, you shouldn't have done that, you dumbass.
Jeez.
Wow. Well, Nolan arrested immediately afterwards by a Tucson police officer. He'd witnessed the shooting from a distance and charged him with the murder. After procuring bail on the murder charges, Nolan was arrested at his home on the 25th of August, 1981, by the ATF on federal weapons possession charges in connection with the shooting of McQuillan.
Oh, yeah. Having been convicted of 2 felonies in Florida State Court in 1966-76, Nolan obviously prohibited from possessing a firearm.
Right.
ATF agents discovered 3 guns in plain view in the living room of his home.
Oh, shit.
Nolan's federal firearms trial was originally scheduled to begin November 2nd, 1981. Dude, there's a lot happening in 1981 for this guy.
Right.
But the court allowed 4 continuances, including one at Nolan's request to allow him to prepare additional evidence, and others to await the completion of a state murder trial, which was initially scheduled to start January 21st, 82.
Oh, wow. The trial went ahead March 2nd, 1982, after the court refused to grant additional continuances. Nolan's defense attorney, Bertram Polis, claimed that pretrial news coverage of the McQuillan shooting would make it impossible for his client to receive a fair trial.
You know, I'm sick of the whole media coverage making it impossible for fair trial. How about don't fucking kill somebody?
Right. And he expressed concerns that the trial of Nolan and his co-defendant, Larry Savage, they call him Stitch, may become a mini murder trial. The court took several steps to control prejudice at trial, including moving proceedings from Tucson to Phoenix, and excluding any references to Nolan's motorcycle gang connections, as well as evidence derived from wiretaps of his telephone.
They did this guy a favor.
Right.
It's cool you moved to Phoenix or whatever, but you think when you the news there gets a hold of it, like, oh, famous, or this murder guy, he's got his trace, and now everybody in Phoenix knows about it.
Yeah.
Stupid. Well, Iris, she acted as a government witness and testified at the trial that Nolan had received several guns in Arizona between October and December of 1980. Due to fears for her safety, she was placed under police protection. Nolan was then convicted on all charges and sentenced to 10 years, that's it, in federal prison.
Wow.
Savage was acquitted of aiding and abetting Nolan's receipt of a firearm.
Okay.
That's only on the gun charge. What about the murder trial, dude?
Right. Well, while awaiting trial for the murder, Nolan became a born-again Christian.
I'm sure he did.
He began writing and copywriting Christian songs, such as Put the Prayer Back in School. After repeated delays, his state murder trial finally commenced in June of 1982. He was acquitted of the murder of McQuillan's killing. It was deemed self-defense.
And what was it, self-defense, just because someone brandishes a firearm?
1984, Nolan convicted in Arizona of receiving the earnings of a prostitute, sentenced to 5 years in prison. Well, at least he's going to jail for something. Right?
Jeez, 1930, he's still in jail for the firearms. June 3rd, 1986, the majority of the Outlaws South Florida chapter, including the already imprisoned Big Jim and his vice president, Fred Yankee Hegney, they were all indicted in a federal racketeering case, which covered a series of crimes in Broward County between 70 and 85. Drug sales, robberies, kidnappings, prostitution, extortion, and 11 moitas. And 11 murders were listed among over 100 predicate acts in the indictment.
Oh.
Acts listed in the indictment included crimes which some of the defendants had previously been tried for, with guilty verdicts in some cases and acquittals in others.
All right.
But now this is a whole different story because it's under RICO, baby.
Yeah. The racketeering trial of Nolan and 5 other South Florida outlaws began in Fort Lauderdale, 27th of January, 1988. After 5 weeks of jury selection, federal prosecutors portrayed the outlaws on trial as members of a criminal enterprise bound by a code of silence who profited from drug dealing and prostitution and evaded arrest for 15 years by intimidating and killing witnesses. Nolan was accused of extortion, assault, ordering multiple murders, and forcing women into prostitution by threatening their families.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Gregor Kehoe, representing the federal government, described Nolan as a man motivated by power and money. Defense attorneys maintain that even if the defendants had committed each crime listed in the indictment, the acts were not even carried out for the benefit of the Outlaws organization. And they contended that some prosecution witnesses had been paid as much as $70,000 by the government and had charges against them dismissed in exchange for their testimony. Who cares?
Oh, wow.
It's the way it works.
Right.
Nolan, he was represented by the defense attorney Charles G. White of Miami.
Following a 14-month trial, the longest in the history of the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida. Wow. Nolan was convicted on 23rd of January, 1989, of violating and conspiracy to violate the RICO Act.
Right.
The jury found that the government had proven 34 of the 38 predicate acts charged against Big Jim. These acts included ordering the murders of George Hartman, Edwin Wiley, Albert Simmons, Naomi Sinekub, The Extortion of Joyce Carleen, Tina Wittenstein, Vaughn Foreman, and Iris Gagon, and narcotics and prostitution offenses. Wow.
On the day of the jury returned its verdict, Nolan wore a T-shirt in the court bearing the slogan, "Support your local outlaws." Oh, wow. All 5 of Nolan's co-defendants were also each convicted of at least 1 count in the indictment. At his sentencing hearing in Miami, October 23rd, 1989, his attorney, he presented 5 witnesses. They included ministers, members of Christian motorcycle clubs, and a Catholic high school teacher, who each testified that he was a sincere born-again Christian.
Aw, too bad.
That doesn't excuse you from past crimes, bro.
The Reverend Daniel Burgoyne, who had a jailhouse ministry in Tucson, he testified that he was convinced of Nolan's sincerity after observing the biker sobbing and crying before God. And he said he never missed a Bible study. He never missed a church service.
Well, why would he when he's got nowhere else to do? It's time to get out of your cell.
Right. Assistant U.S. Attorney Teresa Van Vliet was skeptical of White's assertions that Nolan had changed his life. However, and countered that as far back as 1969, attorneys for Nolan had assured judges that he would cease associating with outlaws if he were given reduced sentences. Van Vliet stated, he's made promises throughout his whole life that he's going to be a good boy, be a productive member of society, but his track record shows he can't.
Yeah. Now, U.S. District Judge William Zloch, he sentenced Nolan to serve 2 consecutive terms of 25 years in federal prison and recommended that he not be considered for parole until he has served all 50 years.
Damn.
He was sentenced by Zloch to the maximum of 20 years on each racketeering count, in addition to another 10 years as requested by the government, which they argued that Nolan was a special dangerous offender.
Wow.
I would have hoped so.
Wow. The influence of the once powerful South Florida chapter of the Outlaws waned severely, partially due to Nolan's incarceration. By the time of his sentencing in 1989, the chapter's membership had diminished to less than a dozen. According to Kehoe, South Florida Outlaws fell off when Jim went to jail, and then he went to Arizona. They never had another leader like Jim. Sergeant Bob Faulkner of the Broward County Sheriff's Office concurred, saying, I don't think they'll ever have a leader again with the charisma of Jim Nolan. Nolan was released from prison October 21st, 2016, after serving 26 years of his sentence. But that judge's a fucking liar.
Right. 20, yeah, it's 70. 16, and apparently gone on to live a better life because he's not been in the news or anything, or not back with the Outlaws, apparently.
Right.
So
look at that shit.
Maybe he did, huh?
Good for him.
I guess good for old Jim Nolan. Jeez, this dude. Holy moly. Wow.
He was a son of a bitch.
I wonder if next month when we get to old Harry Bowman, who is the international president for, I believe, still. He's dead now, so not still. But, yeah, he was the international president. I'm wondering if this guy did the same thing.
Right. Son of a bitch.
But, that's crazy. First motorcycle group we've seen treating the women like that.
Damn.
I mean, obviously, they probably beat them and done all that shit, but no way they were pimping out.
Right.
Doing that shit, dude. That's crazy. Yeah, that's Outlaws Jim Nolan, president of the South Florida chapter of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club.
He was a motherfucker.
He sure was. We'll be back next month for Harry Bowman, like I said. But next week, we are getting into another remastered series where we're continuing, yes, our Prohibition stuff. Don't know what we're going to do yet. Maybe we'll do the real McCoy guy, or John Ashley, the King of the Everglades.
Ooh.
Or maybe we'll even do Nucky. Nucky Johnson. Nucky Thompson.
Nucky Thompson.
Thompson or Johnson?
One of them.
Nucky. Yeah. Nucky, the guy from Boardwalk Empire.
Right.
Yeah, so we got Prohibition coming up, and then rounding out the month with some more serial killers. So we'll be back then. You guys already know what it is. Subscribe. Share it with your friends, leave us a review, all that good stuff, and we'll see you next week for some remastered on Outlaws and Gunslingers. We are the month of Michigan this week.
Bang, dang.